The air inside the small mud brick house near Kumasi was thick with tension, the kind that presses down on your chest and makes it hard to breathe. Outside, the Ghanaian sky roared with thunder, and rain pounded the tin roof like 1,000 angry fists. Inside, 17-year-old ABA stood trembling in the middle of the room, her hands clutching the hem of her faded Kent blouse. Her dark eyes were fixed on the floor, too afraid to meet the blazing gaze of her father, Kwame. "You have brought shame upon us," Kwame's voice boomed, shaking the walls as much as the storm outside. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered from years of working the cocoa fields, his face carved with lines of pride and now fury. 17 years old, and this is what you do? Pregnant? Who is the father? Speak! ABA's lips quivered, but no words came. Her throat felt tight, like someone had tied a rope around it. She wanted to explain, to tell him it wasn't her fault, that she hadn't meant for this to happen. But the weight of his anger silenced her. She could feel the heat of her mother's stare too. Efua, standing by the wooden table, her arms crossed, her lips twisted into a venomous sneer. My God, how could I have given birth to such a disgrace? Efua spat, her voice sharp like the edge of a machete. She was a woman known in the village for her beauty and her strict ways, her head always wrapped in a bright gelly that matched her no-nonsense attitude. So young, and already you've ruined yourself. Ruined us. Do you know what the neighbors will say? The church, the whole of Kumasi will talk. I didn't mean to. ABA stammered, her voice barely a whisper. Tears welled up in her eyes, hot and unstoppable, spilling down her cheeks. Please, Papa, Mama, I didn't mean to. Kwame slammed his fist on the table, making the clay cups rattle and the lantern flicker. You think that excuses this? You think we can just smile and pretend nothing happened? The disgrace you've brought on this family, do you even understand it? How will you show your face in this town again? Efua stepped closer, her eyes cold as the rain outside. Kwame, why waste your breath? A girl like this doesn't belong here anymore. Let her face the consequences of her foolishness. She's no daughter of mine. No, please, Mama. ABA dropped to her knees, her hands reaching out toward Efua, desperation cracking her voice. I'm begging you, don't send me away. I'll do anything, work harder, stay quiet, anything. But Efua turned her face away, her expression as hard as stone. What are you still kneeling there for? Get out! Kwame roared, rising from his chair and pointing to the door. His finger trembled with rage, and his shadow loomed over ABA like a dark cloud. She didn't know where she was going. The streets of Kumasi blurred around her, market stalls shuddered against the rain, the faint glow of lanterns in windows, the distant sound of drums from a festival that felt a world away. Her stomach churned, not just from hunger but from the life growing inside her, a secret she could no longer hide. She pressed a hand to her belly, a silent promise to the child she carried. I'll protect you somehow. The night stretched on, cold and endless. ABA wandered past the edge of town, where the cocoa fields gave way to scattered trees and abandoned shacks. She spotted an old shed, its roof sagging but still standing. Shivering, she approached the door and knocked weakly. Go away! A harsh voice barked from inside. A middle-aged man with a scarred face glared at her through a crack in the wood. This isn't a place for you. Please, just one night. ABA pleaded, her voice hoarse. I won't cause trouble. Get lost. I don't want your problems here. He slammed the door, the sound echoing in the rain. ABA stumbled back, her legs trembling. She had no strength left to argue. The world seemed to close in around her, dark, wet, and unforgiving. She sank to her knees beside the shed, the mud soaking through her skirt, and let the tears come again. Why does everyone hate me? She whispered into the storm, but the only answer was the relentless patter of rain on her skin. The rain didn't let up. It fell in heavy sheets, drumming against the earth, turning the red dirt paths of Kumasi into a slippery mess that clung to ABA's ankles. She stumbled through the darkness, her soaked Kent blouse sticking to her skin, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps. The storm seemed to mock her, its thunder rolling like the angry shouts of her father, still ringing in her ears. She had no plan, no destination, just the desperate need to keep moving, to escape the weight of shame pressing down on her 17-year-old shoulders. Her feet carried her past the last cluster of mud brick houses on the edge of town, where the glow of kerosene lanterns faded into the dark, rain-soaked expanse of the cocoa fields. The air smelled of wet earth and rotting leaves, a bitter reminder of the life she'd known, helping her father harvest cocoa pods, laughing with her mother over bowls of fufu in the evenings. That life was gone now, washed away like the footprints she left behind in the mud. ABA's stomach growled, a sharp pang that made her wince. She hadn't eaten since the morning, too nervous to swallow the kenki her mother had set out before everything fell apart. Now, hunger gnawed at her, but it was nothing compared to the ache in her chest. She pressed a trembling hand to her belly, feeling the faint swell beneath her blouse. "We'll be okay," she whispered to the child inside her, though the words felt hollow. How could she promise anything when she had nothing left? The wind whipped through the trees, sending cold droplets stinging against her face. She spotted a cluster of mango trees ahead, their broad leaves offering a sliver of shelter. Her legs burned with exhaustion, but she pushed forward, slipping and sliding until she reached the largest tree. Its gnarled roots rose from the ground like twisted fingers, and she sank down between them, curling into herself to shield her body from the rain. The bark scraped her back, but she didn't care. It was something solid, something to hold on to in a world that had turned liquid and cruel. Her teeth chattered as the cold seeped into her bones. She pulled her knees up, wrapping her arms around them, and let her head fall forward. Tears mixed with the rain on her cheeks, hot and silent. "Papa, Mama, why?" she murmured, her voice lost in the storm. She could still see their faces, Kwame's fury, Efua's disgust, like a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. She'd always been their good girl, the one who fetched water without complaint, who sang hymns at church louder than anyone. How had it come to this? A rustling sound snapped her out of her thoughts. She lifted her head, squinting through the downpour. Shadows moved in the distance, 3 figures, their outlines blurred by the rain. Her heart thudded against her ribs. She pressed herself tighter against the tree, hoping they'd pass by, but the sound of coarse laughter told her she wasn't that lucky. "Hey, girl! What are you doing out here all alone?" a voice called, rough and mocking. The figures drew closer, and ABA could make them out now, 3 young men, their shirts soaked through, their eyes glinting with something dangerous. The one in front, tall and wiry with a scar across his cheek, grinned wide enough to show missing teeth. ABA's mouth went dry. I'm just resting," she said, her voice shaking. She scrambled to her feet, her back pressed against the tree trunk. Mud squelched under her sandals, making her wobble. "Resting, another one said, shorter and stocky, stepping closer. He reeked of palm wine, the sour stench cutting through the rain. "You look lost, little sister. What's a pretty thing like you doing out in this mess?" "We're just looking for some fun," the third one added, his voice low and sly. He tilted his head, eyeing her up and down, and ABA felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. "You're perfect for it. Please leave me alone," ABA said, stepping back. Her heel caught on a root, and she nearly fell, catching herself against the tree. The scarred one laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. "Trouble? Oh, we're not trouble, sweetheart. We're your friends tonight. Don't run now where you think you're going." ABA didn't wait to find out what they meant. She bolted, her feet slipping on the wet ground as she darted away from the tree. The men shouted behind her, their footsteps splashing through the mud, closing in fast. Panic surged through her, sharper than the hunger, colder than the rain. She ran blindly, her braids whipping against her face, her lungs burning. The slippery earth threatened to trip her with every step, but she couldn't stop. She wouldn't. "There she goes!" one of them yelled, his voice too close. "Get her!" ABA veered off the path, plunging into a narrow gap between 2 abandoned shacks. The space was tight, barely wide enough for her to squeeze through, but it slowed them down. She heard a curse as one of them stumbled, followed by the thud of a body hitting the ground. She didn't look back. She kept running until the sounds faded, swallowed by the storm. Her legs gave out near a ditch by the roadside. She collapsed into the mud, her hands sinking into the cold, wet earth. Her chest heaved, each breath a sob she couldn't hold back. She was shaking, part from fear, part from the fever creeping up her spine. Her head throbbed, and her vision blurred, the world tilting like a broken kaleidoscope. "Why does everyone hate me?" she whispered again, her voice cracking. "What did I do?" The rain showed no mercy, pounding her back, soaking her through until she felt like she was drowning on dry land. She curled up in the ditch, clutching her stomach as if it could anchor her. Her eyes fluttered shut, exhaustion pulling her under. In her fevered dreams, her parents appeared, Kwame's fists clenched, Efua's face twisted with scorn. "You deserve this," Efua's voice echoed, loud as thunder, jolting ABA awake. She gasped, her eyes snapping open. The rain still fell, but her body ached worse now, every muscle screaming. Her lips were pale, trembling from the chill, and a high fever clouded her mind. Am I going to die here? The thought slipped through her, quiet and terrifying. She didn't have the strength to fight it anymore. Everything blurred, sound, sight, hope, until she was just a shadow in the storm. Child, what are you doing here? A warm voice broke through the haze, soft but firm. ABA blinked, struggling to focus. A silhouette loomed over her, a woman, elderly, holding a large black umbrella that shielded them both from the rain. Her face was lined with age, her eyes kind but worried, framed by a headscarf tied tight against the wind. Aye. ABA tried to speak, but her voice failed her. Her head spun, and she slumped forward, collapsing into the stranger's arms. Don't be afraid, poor child. I'll help you, the woman said, her voice steady as she knelt in the mud. Her hands, rough from years of work, gently lifted ABA's limp form. You can't stay out here like this. Who are you? ABA murmured, her eyes fluttering shut again. She was too weak to hold them open. I'm just an old baker, the woman replied, a faint smile in her tone. They call me Mama Adwoa. Come, let's get you out of this rain. Through the relentless downpour, Mama Adwoa carried ABA, her steps slow but determined. The girl's weight was light, too light for someone her age, and it tugged at the old woman's heart. She headed toward her small bakery on the edge of Kumasi, a modest place with mud walls and a tin roof, its windows glowing faintly with the promise of warmth. The scent of frying akara lingered in the air, a stark contrast to the cold outside. For the first time that night, ABA felt a flicker of something soft against the hardness of her world, a stranger's kindness, fragile but real. The rain battered the tin roof of Mama Adwoa's bakery like a relentless drumbeat, but inside, the air was thick with the comforting aroma of frying akara and simmering groundnut soup. The small room glowed with the soft amber light of a kerosene lantern hanging from a rusty nail on the mud wall. ABA lay slumped in Mama Adwoa's arms as the old woman pushed open the wooden door with her shoulder, her breath puffing out in small clouds from the effort. The girl's body was limp, her soaked blouse clinging to her skin, her braids dripping water onto the rough cement floor. Easy now, child, Mama Adwoa murmured, her voice low and soothing, the kind of tone you'd use to calm a frightened go-kid. She shuffled across the room, her worn slippers scuffing against the floor, and gently lowered ABA onto a wooden bench padded with an old, patched blanket. The girl's head lolled to one side, her eyes half open, clouded with fever and exhaustion. Her lips trembled, pale against her dark skin, and a faint shiver ran through her frame. Mama Adwoa clicked her tongue, a sound of pity and determination mixed together. Oh, my poor girl, what has the world done to you? She whispered, brushing a calloused hand across ABA's forehead. It was burning hot, despite the chill of her rain-soaked body. The old woman's brow furrowed, her eyes narrowing with concern. She'd seen hardship before, too many times in her long life, but something about this girl, so young and fragile, tugged at her heart like a thread caught on a thorn. Without a word, she turned to the small clay stove in the corner, where a pot of groundnut soup bubbled softly, its rich, nutty scent mingling with the sharpness of ginger and dried fish. She ladled some into a chipped ceramic bowl, her hands steady despite their age, and grabbed a plate of golden akara from a tray by the window. The fritters were still warm, their crisp edges glistening with palm oil. She carried them back to ABA, setting them on a low stool beside the bench. Wake up, child, Mama Adwoa said gently, resting a hand on ABA's shoulder. You need something in your belly. You're too weak to fight this fever otherwise. ABA stirred, her eyelids fluttering open. The world swam into focus slowly, the flickering lantern, the mud walls plastered with faded newspaper clippings, the kind face peering down at her. Her head throbbed, and her stomach twisted with a hunger she couldn't ignore, but a deeper ache held her back. I don't deserve it, she rasped, her voice barely audible. Tears welled up again, stinging her eyes. I'm a disgrace. My papa said so. My mama too. Mama Adwoa's face softened, but her grip on ABA's shoulder tightened just enough to steady her. Hush now, she said firmly, her tone leaving no room for argument. I don't care what they said. You're here with me, and no one goes hungry under my roof. You hear me? She picked up an akara, breaking it in half, and held it close to ABA's lips. Eat. Just a little. For me. ABA hesitated, her hands trembling as they hovered near the food. The warmth of the fritter brushed against her fingertips, and the smell made her mouth water despite herself. But the voices of Kwame and Efua echoed in her mind. Shameful girl. Get out! And her throat closed up. She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. I can't. I don't deserve kindness. Not after what I've done. Mama Adwoa set the Akara down with a sigh, but her eyes never left ABA's face. She pulled the stool closer and sat beside the girl, her knees creaking as she settled. For a moment, she said nothing, just watched the tears fall, her silence heavy with understanding. Then she reached out, taking ABA's frail hands in her own. Her palms were rough from years of kneading dough, but they radiated a warmth that seeped into ABA's cold fingers. Listen to me, child, Mama Adwoa said, her voice steady and low, like the hum of a hymn at dawn. I don't know what happened to you out there, and I'm not asking. But I know this, you're not a disgrace. You're a girl who's been hurt, and that's not the same thing. Whatever your papa and mama said, they don't get to decide your worth. You're alive, and that's enough for me. ABA's sobs grew louder, her shoulders shaking as the weight of those words sank in. She wanted to believe them, wanted to cling to the stranger's kindness like a lifeline, but the pain was too deep, too raw. They hate me, she choked out. Everyone does. I've ruined everything. Mama Adwoa squeezed her hands tighter, her gaze unwavering. Not everyone. I don't hate you, and I won't let you hate yourself either. She let go briefly to pick up the bowl of soup, stirring it with a wooden spoon. Now, no more of this nonsense. You're going to eat, and then you're going to rest. We'll figure the rest out later. This time, ABA didn't resist. She let Mama Adwoa guide the spoon to her lips, the warm, creamy soup sliding down her throat like a bomb. It tasted of home, of groundnuts roasted over an open fire, of evenings when life was simpler, but it also tasted of something new, something she couldn't name. She swallowed another spoonful, then took a small bite of the akara, its crispness giving way to a soft, savory center. Her stomach growled in gratitude, and for the first time that night, the cold in her bones began to thaw. There we go, Mama Adwoa said, a small smile tugging at her lips. She set the bowl down and fetched a dry wrapper from a woven basket in the corner, draping it over ABA's shoulders. The fabric was coarse but clean, dyed in bold reds and yellows, and it smelled faintly of wood smoke. You're soaked through. Let's get you warm. ABA pulled the wrapper tighter around herself, her fingers brushing the intricate patterns. Thank you, she whispered, her voice still shaky but laced with a flicker of gratitude. She looked at Mama Adwoa, really looked at her, the deep lines etched into her face, the silver strands peeking out from her headscarf, the quiet strength in her posture. Why are you helping me? You don't even know me. Mama Adwoa chuckled softly, a sound like the rustle of dry leaves. I don't need to know you to see you need help. I've lived long enough to know what suffering looks like, and I've got no business turning my back on it. She stood, her joints popping, and moved to stoke the fire under the stove. Besides, this old place gets lonely sometimes. A little company won't hurt. ABA managed a faint smile, the first since the storm began. She finished the soup slowly, savoring each spoonful, and let the warmth spread through her chest. The fever still lingered, making her head heavy, but the panic that had gripped her earlier loosened its hold. She leaned back against the bench, the blanket soft beneath her, and watched Mama Adwoa bustle around the tiny bakery, wiping down the counter, stacking trays, humming a tune ABA didn't recognize but found oddly comforting. Sleep now, Mama Adwoa said, glancing over her shoulder. She pulled a straw mat from under a shelf and spread it near the stove, adding another blanket on top. You need rest more than anything. Tomorrow's a new day. ABA nodded, too tired to argue. She slid off the bench and crawled onto the mat, curling up under the blanket. The heat from the stove washed over her, and the sound of Mama Adwoa's humming blended with the rain outside, lulling her into a fragile peace. As her eyes drifted shut, she thought of the child inside her, of the life she had to protect. We're safe now, she whispered to her belly, her voice barely a breath. For tonight, at least. Mama Adwoa watched her from across the room, her hands resting on her hips. The girl's breathing steadied, her small frame finally still. The old woman shook her head, a mix of pity and resolve in her eyes. Sleep well, little one, she murmured. You're not alone anymore. Outside, the rain continued its relentless dance, but inside the bakery, a quiet warmth held the darkness at bay. The morning sun broke through the clouds, casting a weak, golden light over the muddy streets of Kumasi's outskirts. Inside Mama Adwoa's bakery, the air still carried the faint scent of yesterday's akara, but a new tension simmered beneath the warmth. ABA stood behind the wooden counter, her hands trembling as she wiped it down with a damp rag. The fever had eased overnight, leaving her weak but restless. She glanced at Mama Adwoa, who knelt by the clay stove, kneading dough with steady, practiced hands. The old woman's presence was a quiet anchor, but it couldn't drown out the storm brewing in ABA's chest. She'd been at the bakery for 3 days now, sleeping on the straw mat, helping Mama Adwoa fry plantains and roll dough into neat balls. It wasn't much, but it was something, a fragile thread of purpose in a life that felt unmoored. Yet every creak of the door made her flinch. Every shadow passing the window sent her heart racing. She couldn't shake the feeling that the world outside was watching, waiting to pounce. The door swung open with a harsh groan, and ABA froze. A man stepped in, Kofi, a wiry trader from the market, his faded shirt stained with palm oil, his eyes sharp and accusing. He carried a sack of yams slung over his shoulder, but his gaze locked onto ABA like a hawk spotting prey. The rag slipped from her fingers, landing with a wet slap on the counter. "Mama Adwoa," Kofi said, his voice loud enough to fill the small room. "We need to talk." He dropped the sack by the door with a thud, dust puffing up from the floor, and crossed his arms. "Now!" Mama Adwoa didn't look up from her dough. "If it's about yams, Kofi, you know my price," she said calmly, her fingers pressing into the soft mound. "If it's something else, spit it out quick. I've got work to do." Kofi's lips curled into a sneer. "It's about her." He jerked his chin toward ABA, who shrank back against the wall, her breath catching in her throat. "You think you can hide her here and nobody will notice? The whole town's talking, Mama. They say she's a disgrace, kicked out of her own house for. Well, you know." His eyes flicked to ABA's belly, barely rounded but impossible to miss. ABA's hands flew to her stomach, clutching the fabric of her blouse, as if she could shield herself from his words. Her face burned, shame and fear twisting together like a knot in her gut. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the mud walls and never be seen again. Mama Adwoa stood slowly, wiping her hands on her apron. Her eyes narrowed, glinting with a fire ABA hadn't seen before. "Mind your tongue, Kofi," she snapped, her voice cutting through the air like a whip. "What she's done, or hasn't done, is none of your business. She's here with me, and that's the end of it." Kofi laughed, a harsh, grating sound that made ABA flinch. "Oh, it's my business when it's my bread I'm buying. You think people will keep coming here with that in your shop?" He pointed at ABA, his fingers stabbing the air. "They're already whispering at the market. Mama Adwoa has gone soft, taking in a pregnant girl with no shame. You'll lose everything, mark my words." The words hit ABA like a slap. Her knees buckled, and she gripped the counter to steady herself. She could hear them now, the voices of the town, neighbors she'd once greeted with smiles, women she'd helped carry baskets from the river, all turning against her. Disgrace, shame, ruin. Her chest tightened, each breath a struggle against the weight crushing her. Mama Adwoa stepped forward, planting herself between ABA and Kofi. "If they don't want my bread, they can starve," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "I've run this place for 30 years, and I don't need your approval, or anyone's, to decide who stays under my roof. Get out if you got nothing useful to say." Kofi's sneer faltered, but he didn't back down. "You're a fool, old woman. Keep her here and you'll see. Trouble's coming." He turned on his heel, slamming the door so hard the lantern swayed, casting wild shadows across the room. The silence that followed was suffocating. ABA slid down the wall, her legs giving out, and buried her face in her hands. "He's right," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm ruining you. I should go." Mama Adwoa whirled around, her apron flapping. "Don't you dare say that," she barked, kneeling beside ABA with a speed that belied her age. She grabbed the girl's wrists, pulling her hands away from her tear-streaked face. "You're not ruining anything. You hear me? This is my home, my bakery, and I say who belongs here. Not Kofi, not the market gossips me." ABA shook her head, sobs clawing their way out. "But they hate me. They'll hate you too. I can't let that happen." Mama Adwoa's grip softened, but her eyes blazed. "Let them hate. I've lived through worse than their wagging tongues. You're staying, and that's final." She stood, pulling ABA up with her, and pressed a firm hand against the girl's back. "Now, help me with this dough. Work keeps the mind quiet." ABA obeyed, her hands shaky as she shaped the dough, but the peace didn't last. That afternoon, the storm broke again, not rain this time, but people. The door burst open, and 3 young men stormed in, their boots tracking mud across the floor. The leader, Kojo, was broad and loud, his shirt torn at the sleeve, his grin sharp as a blade. ABA recognized him instantly, one of the boys from the mango tree, the one with the scar. Her heart plummeted. Well, well, Kojo said, his voice booming like thunder through the small room. So this is where you've been hiding? A little runaway? He sauntered toward the counter, his friend snickering behind him. Thought you could just settle in here like nothing happened? ABA backed away, her spine hitting the wall. Please, she stammered. I'm not hurting anyone. Mama Adwoa stepped forward, broom in hand. Get out, Kojo, she snapped, her tone icy. You've got no business here. Kojo laughed, kicking over a stool with a crash. Oh, I've got business, old woman. This place used to be decent, now it's a shelter for trash. He lunged toward ABA, grabbing her arm before she could dodge. His grip was iron, his breath hot with palm wine. You think you can ruin our town and just sit pretty? Let her go. Mama Adwoa swung the broom, catching Kojo's shoulder with a thud. He snarled, releasing ABA to shove the old woman back. She stumbled, catching herself on the counter, but her eyes never wavered. Stop it, ABA cried, tears streaming down her face. She threw herself between them, her small frame trembling. I'll leave, just don't hurt her. Kojo smirked, towering over her. Too late for that. You've already brought trouble. He grabbed a tray of akara from the counter and hurled it to the floor, the fritters scattering like broken promises. His friends joined in, smashing bowls, kicking over baskets, their laughter filling the air like a thunderstorm. Mama Adwoa roared, swinging the broom again, but they were too fast. Kojo shoved her aside, and she fell hard, her head cracking against the stove. Stay down, old hag, he spat, turning back to ABA. This is your fault. You're a curse on this place. ABA dropped to her knees beside Mama Adwoa, her hands shaking as she touched the old woman's face. Mama, please, she sobbed. Blood trickled from a cut on Mama Adwoa's forehead, but her eyes fluttered open, fierce and alive. Get out, Mama Adwoa rasped, glaring at Kojo. Now. Kojo sneered but stepped back, wiping his hands on his shirt. Fine, but this isn't over. You'll see. He stormed out, his friends trailing behind, leaving chaos in their wake. ABA clung to Mama Adwoa, tears soaking the old woman's apron. I'm sorry, she wailed. This is all my fault. Mama Adwoa sat up, wincing, and pulled ABA into her arms. Hush, she said, her voice ragged but firm. It's not your fault. It's theirs, their hate, their cruelty. We'll clean this up. Together. But as ABA looked at the wreckage, the shattered bowls, the trampled bread, guilt gnawed at her. She couldn't stay. Not if it meant this. The bakery was a graveyard of broken things. Shards of clay bowls littered the cement floor, glinting faintly in the dim light of the kerosene lantern. Trampled akara lay scattered like fallen soldiers, their golden crusts smeared into the mud tracked in by Kojo and his gang. The air, once warm with the scent of frying dough, now hung heavy with dust and despair. ABA knelt beside Mama Adwoa, her hands trembling as she pressed a damp cloth to the old woman's forehead. The cut was shallow, a thin line of blood already drying, but the sight of it pierced ABA deeper than any blade. I'm so sorry, ABA whispered, her voice cracking like brittle wood. Tears streamed down her face, hot and relentless, pooling in the hollows of her collarbone. This is all my fault. If I hadn't come here, none of this would have happened. Mama Adwoa gripped ABA's wrist, her fingers firm despite the tremor in them. Stop that, she rasped, her breath uneven from the fall. Her eyes, though clouded with pain, burned with a stubborn fire. You didn't break those bowls. You didn't swing that fist. They did. Not you. ABA shook her head, pulling away to cradle her face in her hands. But they came because of me, she sobbed, her words muffled against her palms. Kofi was right. They hate me, and now they hate you too. I'm a curse, Mama Adwoa. I ruin everything I touch. The old woman struggled to sit up, wincing as she braced herself against the counter. You're no curse, she said, her voice sharp despite its weariness. You're a girl who's been kicked down, that's all. And I won't hear you talk like this. We'll fix it, sweep the floor, bake more bread. We've faced worse. But ABA couldn't hear the hope in those words. Her mind was a storm of its own, louder than the rain that had driven her here. She saw Kojo sneer, felt his grip on her arm, heard the crash of the tray hitting the ground. She saw Kofi's accusing finger, the whispers of the market women, the cold disdain in her parents' eyes. Everywhere she turned, there was hate, sharp, suffocating, inescapable. And now it had spilled over onto the one person who dared to care for her. She stood abruptly, her legs shaky but driven by a desperate resolve. "I can't stay," she said, her voice hollow. "I won't let them hurt you again." She stumbled toward the door, her sandals crunching over the debris, her heart pounding against her ribs. "ABA, wait!" Mama Adwoa called, reaching out, but ABA didn't stop. She flung the door open, the humid night air rushing in, thick with the smell of wet earth and distant smoke. The street outside was quiet, the chaos of the day swallowed by darkness, but to ABA, it felt like a battlefield waiting to erupt again. She stepped out, her wrapper slipping from her shoulders, and let the door slam shut behind her. The silence of the night was a lie. As ABA walked, her bare arms prickling in the cool breeze, she felt eyes on her, imagined or real, she couldn't tell. The mud sucked at her feet, slowing her steps, mirroring the weight dragging at her soul. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to leave, had to take her poison away from Mama Adwoa before it destroyed her too. Her hand rested on her belly, the faint curve a silent reminder of the life she carried. "I'm doing this for you," she whispered to the child inside her, but the words tasted like ash. How could she save anyone when she couldn't save herself? The market loomed ahead, its stalls shuttered and skeletal under the moonless sky. ABA had been there countless times, haggling for yams with her mother, laughing as traders tossed her extra groundnuts for her smile. Now, it was a different place, a gauntlet of judgment she couldn't avoid. She slipped between the rows, her shadow flickering against the wooden frames, until a voice cut through the stillness like a machete. "There she is!" A woman's shout, shrill and venomous, stopped ABA cold. She turned to see Mame Serwa, a stout fish seller with a gilly tied tight around her head, pointing at her from a stall lit by a flickering lantern. "The thief! She stole my purse this morning." ABA's heart lurched. "No," she stammered, stepping back. "I didn't. I swear I didn't take anything." Mame Serwa marched forward, her apron flapping, her eyes blazing with fury. "Don't lie to me, girl. I had 10 sadies in that purse, and it's gone since you slunk by my stall." Her voice rose, drawing a crowd from the shadows, traders closing up, passers-by lured by the drama. Their murmurs buzzed like flies around a carcass. "I wasn't even here today," ABA cried, her hands raised as if to ward off the accusation. "Please, I wouldn't steal, I don't." "Search her," someone yelled, a man's voice, harsh and eager. The crowd surged closer, their faces a blur of suspicion and scorn. ABA backed away, her sandals slipping in the mud, but 2 men stepped forward, blocking her path. One grabbed her arm, his grip rough, while the other snatched the small cloth bag slung over her shoulder, the only thing she'd taken from the bakery. "No, please." ABA struggled, her voice rising in panic as they tore the bag open. They rummaged through it. A scrap of bread, a folded wrapper, a few coins Mama Adwoa had pressed into her hand that morning. No purse, no sadies, nothing. The man holding the bag scowled, tossing it into the mud. "Nothing here," he muttered, but Mame Serwa wasn't satisfied. "She hid it somewhere else," the woman shrieked, jabbing a finger at ABA. "A girl like her, pregnant, no family, she's no good. Probably sold it already." The crowd nodded, their whispers turning to shouts. "Thief! Shameful girl! Get her out of here!" The words pounded against ABA like fists, each one a blow to her crumbling spirit. She sank to her knees, the mud soaking through her skirt, her hands clutching her head as if she could block them out. "I didn't do it," she sobbed, but her voice was drowned by their jeers. "Call the police!" Mame Serwa bellowed, her face red with rage. "Let them deal with her!" ABA's vision blurred with tears, her chest heaving. She saw herself in chains, dragged through the streets, locked away where no one would hear her cries. She saw her child born behind bars, hated before it could even breathe. The thought clawed at her, ripping away the last threads of hope she'd clung to. She was nothing, a stain, a mistake, a ghost no one wanted to see. "Enough!" A sharp voice sliced through the chaos, halting the crowd. ABA looked up, her eyes swollen, to see Mama Adwoa limping toward them, a broom in one hand, a lantern in the other. Her forehead was bandaged with a strip of cloth, her wrapper stained with flour and blood, but her posture was unyielding. "Leave her alone!" she roared, shoving her way through the throng. Mame Serwa crossed her arms. "Stay out of this, Adwoa. She's trouble. You saw what happened to your shop." Mama Adwoa planted herself in front of ABA, her lantern casting a fierce glow. "I saw cowards breaking my things because they're too small to face their own sins," she spat. "You've got no proof she stole anything, so shut your mouth before I shut it for you." The crowd murmured, but Mame Serwa held her ground. She doesn't belong here, she hissed. And neither will you if you keep her. Then I'll close my doors, Mama Adwoa shot back, her voice trembling with fury. But I won't abandon her. Go home, all of you. Slowly, the crowd dispersed, their grumbles fading into the night. Aba remained on her knees, her body shaking, her mind a void. Mama Adwoa dropped beside her, pulling her into a fierce embrace. You're not alone, she whispered, her voice breaking. I've got you. But Aba couldn't feel the warmth. She was drowning in her own despair, the weight of the world crushing her. I can't stay, she murmured, her voice a ghost of itself. I'll destroy you. Mama Adwoa held her tighter, but Aba's resolve hardened. She had to go, for Mama Adwoa, for the child inside her, for the last shred of herself she could still save. The night swallowed Aba whole as she slipped away from Mama Adwoa's arms, her steps silent but heavy with resolve. The old woman's pleas, Aba, don't go. We'll fix this, faded into the hum of crickets and the rustle of leaves, drowned by the roar of guilt in Aba's ears. She couldn't look back. The image of Mama Adwoa's bloodied forehead, the wreckage of the bakery, the venom of the market crowd, they burned behind her eyes, a fire she couldn't extinguish. She was a plague, a walking wound, and staying would only spread the rot. Her sandals sank into the muddy path, the cold muck seeping between her toes. The wrapper Mama Adwoa had given her hung loose around her shoulders, its bright colors dulled by the night's gloom. She clutched her small cloth bag, now empty of coins, its contents scattered in the market mud, and pressed a hand to her belly. The faint flutter there was her only tether, a fragile thread tying her to something alive. I'm doing this for you, she whispered to the child inside her, but the words tasted like ash. How could she save anyone when she couldn't save herself? The outskirts of Kumasi stretched before her, a maze of dirt tracks and scattered shacks, their tin roofs glinting faintly under a sliver of moon. She wandered aimlessly, her legs aching, her breath shallow. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and charcoal smoke, a bitter reminder of the home she'd lost. Every shadow felt like a threat, every rustle a footstep ready to pounce. She was alone, truly, utterly alone, and the weight of it pressed down until her chest felt like it might cave in. After what felt like hours, Aba stumbled upon a sagging building at the edge of town, its sign half fallen, a Kojua's rest house. The windows were cracked, the walls patched with peeling plaster, but a faint light flickered inside. She hesitated, her hand hovering over the door. She had no money, no plan, but the exhaustion gnawing at her bones left her no choice. She knocked, the sound weak against the wood. The door creaked open, revealing a woman with a stern face and a geli tied tight around her head. Akojua, the owner, eyed Aba up and down, her lips pursed. What do you want? She snapped, her voice rough as gravel. I need a place to stay, Aba said, her throat dry. Just for a few nights. I can work, clean, cook, anything. Akojua's gaze lingered on Aba's belly, her expression hardening. No money, eh? Figures. She stepped aside, jerking her head toward the dim interior. Room 3. 10 cedis a night. Don't bother me if you can't pay. She tossed a rusty key at Aba, who caught it with trembling hands, and slammed the door behind her. The room was a coffin, small, dark, and damp, with a single mattress sagging on a metal frame. A cracked mirror hung crooked on the wall, reflecting Aba's hollow eyes and mud-streaked face. She sank onto the bed, the springs groaning under her weight, and buried her face in her hands. What am I doing? She whispered, her voice breaking. The silence answered with a cruel emptiness, amplifying the thud of her heart. Sleep eluded her that night. The mattress smelled of mold, the walls creaked with every gust of wind, and the laughter of children outside pierced her like needles. She curled up, clutching her belly, her mind replaying the day's horrors, Kojo's fists, Mameserwa's accusations, Mama Adwoa's fall. I'm trash, she murmured, tears soaking the thin pillow. I'm nothing. Morning came too soon, gray and heavy. Aba dragged herself out, determined to find work, anything to pay Akojua, to prove she could survive. She walked the streets, her sandals slapping against the drying mud, and approached every stall, every shop. Please, I'll sweep, carry loads, anything, she begged a yam trader, her voice small. No work here, he grunted, waving her off without a glance. She tried a seamstress next, her hands clasped in desperation. I can learn to sew. I'm quick, I swear. The woman laughed, sharp and cold. We don't need your kind here. Move along. Every rejection was a stone piling on her chest, crushing her breath by breath. By noon, her stomach growled, her legs shook, and her hope was a tattered rag. She leaned against a wall near the market, her eyes burning with unshed tears. "No one wants me," she whispered, sliding down to sit in the dust. "Not even me." The day wore on, and ABA returned to the rest house empty-handed. As she approached her room, a group of children gathered near the door, their laughter slicing through the air. "Look at her belly!" one shouted, a boy with a gap-toothed grin, pointing at ABA. "It's like a big melon." "She's a bad girl," another chimed in, a girl with braids swinging as she danced around. "My mama said her family threw her out 'cause she's dirty." ABA froze, her bag slipping from her shoulder. "Stop it," she said, her voice trembling. "You don't know me." "We know enough," the boy jeered, tossing a pebble that bounced off her leg. The others laughed louder, their taunts a chorus of cruelty. ABA's hands balled into fists, but she couldn't fight back. Not against children, not against the truth in their words. She turned and fled into her room, slamming the door as their giggles echoed behind her. Inside, the darkness swallowed her again. She sank to the floor, her back against the door, and let the sobs come, raw, guttural, tearing from her throat. "I can't do this," she cried, her nails digging into her palms. "I can't keep going." The child inside her kicked, a faint protest, but it only deepened her despair. "I'm failing you too," she whispered. "I've got nothing to give." A sharp knock jolted her upright. "Open the door." Akojua's voice barked from the other side. ABA scrambled to her feet, wiping her face, and cracked the door open. The woman's eyes were cold, her arms crossed. "You stole from me, didn't you?" she accused, her tone dripping with venom. ABA's heart sank. "No," she said, shaking her head frantically. "I didn't, I'd never. Don't lie." Akojua shouted, pushing the door wide. "5 Sadie's gone from my drawer since you got here. You think I'm a fool?" Her voice carried, drawing curious stares from the other tenants peering out their doors. "I swear I didn't take it," ABA pleaded, tears spilling anew. "Please, believe me." 24 hours. Akojua cut her off, jabbing a finger at ABA's chest. "Pay up or get out. I don't keep thieves." She turned and stormed off, leaving ABA trembling in the doorway, the whispers of the tenants, buzzing like vultures overhead. ABA stumbled back inside, her breath hitching. She checked her bag, empty as always, but the accusation clung to her like damp rot. That night, she returned from a futile search for work to find her room ransacked. The mattress was flipped, her wrapper torn, the few coins she'd hidden under the pillow gone. "No," she gasped, dropping to her knees. No, this can't be." She ran to Akojua, her voice raw. "Someone broke in. They took everything." Akojua's laugh was a slap. "You did this yourself, girl. Don't play me for a fool." She pointed to the door. "Out by morning, or I call the police." ABA staggered back to her room, her world collapsing. She sank to the floor, clutching her belly as the wind howled through the cracked window. "Where do we go now?" she whispered, her voice a broken thread. "What do we do?" The silence was her only answer, cold and merciless, as the last flicker of light in her died out. The wind howled through the cracks of the abandoned shack where ABA had curled up, a cruel lullaby that offered no rest. The night was a black void, pressing against her swollen eyes, her body trembling from cold and hunger. She lay on her side in the dirt, her torn wrapper barely covering her, her hands cradling her belly, as if it were the last piece of herself she could hold on to. The child inside kicked faintly, a whisper of life in the wreckage of her spirit. "I'm sorry," she murmured, her voice a fragile thread lost in the gusts. "I tried. I really tried." Her stomach growled, a hollow ache that had become a constant companion. She hadn't eaten since the scrap of bread 2 days ago, stolen from her bag along with her hope. The streets had rejected her, every plea for work met with cold stares, every corner a reminder of her worthlessness. Akojua's words, "Out by morning, or I call the police," echoed in her mind, a final shove into the abyss. She'd wandered away from the rest house at dawn, her feet dragging her to this forgotten place where the town's edge met the wild, untamed bush. Here, at least, no one could see her break. ABA's breath hitched, a sob she couldn't suppress. Her mind was a tangle of shadows, Kwame's fury, Efua's disdain, Kojo's fists, the market's jeers, Akojua's sneer. They swirled together, a storm that drowned out the girl she'd once been. "I'm nothing," she whispered, her lips trembling against the dirt. "I'm nothing to anyone." The thought of her child growing up in this darkness, of being hated as she was, clawed at her chest, leaving her gasping. She closed her eyes, willing the world to fade, to let her slip away into the quiet she craved. A soft crunch broke the silence, footsteps, slow and deliberate. ABA's heart stuttered, but she didn't move. She was too tired, too broken to care if it was Kojo or some other predator come to finish her. The steps grew closer, stopping just above her head. A faint light pierced the darkness, warm and golden, brushing against her face like a gentle hand. ABA! The voice came soft and trembling with worry, yet flowed steady like a gentle river. It wrapped around her, pulling her from the depths. She opened her eyes, blinking against the glow of a lantern. A silhouette knelt before her, Mama Adwoa, her face etched with exhaustion, her headscarf slipping back to reveal silver strands. She held the lantern in one hand, an old umbrella in the other, its edges frayed but shielding them from the drizzle that had begun to fall. ABA's breath caught, a sob lodging in her throat. "Mama," she whispered, her voice raw and disbelieving. She reached out, her fingers brushing the hem of Mama Adwoa's wrapper, as if testing if she were real. "Oh, my child," Mama Adwoa gasped, dropping to her knees in the dirt. The lantern clattered beside her, its light spilling across the ground, illuminating the tears glistening in her eyes. "I've been looking everywhere for you, day and night, asking every soul in Kumasi, where's my girl? Where's my ABA?" Her voice broke, and she pulled ABA into her arms, cradling her like a mother with a newborn. ABA melted into the embrace, her body shaking as the dam inside her burst. I didn't want to hurt you anymore," she sobbed, her words spilling out between gasps. "They broke your shop, they hurt you, all because of me. I had to go. I had to." "Hush, hush," Mama Adwoa murmured, rocking her gently. Her hands, rough from years of dough and fire, stroked ABA's back with a tenderness that felt like sunlight after a storm. "You didn't hurt me. Those fools did, their hate, their small hearts. Not you, never you." She pulled back just enough to cup ABA's face, her thumbs wiping away the tears and grime. "You scared me half to death, running off like that. I thought I'd lost you." ABA clung to her, burying her face in Mama Adwoa's shoulder. The scent of flour and palm oil clung to the old woman's wrapper, a lifeline pulling her back from the edge. "I'm sorry," she choked out. "I didn't know what else to do. Everyone hates me. They call me a thief, a disgrace. I couldn't stay and ruin you too." Mama Adwoa's grip tightened, her voice soft but fierce. "Listen to me, ABA. You're not a disgrace. You're my family now, you hear? I don't care what they say, what they do. I'd search this whole world for you, and I'd do it again." She smoothed ABA's tangled braids, her fingers gentle but sure. "You're not ruining me. You're giving me something to fight for." ABA lifted her head, her eyes searching Mama Adwoa's face. The lines there spoke of a hard life, but the warmth in her gaze was a balm, soothing the raw edges of ABA's soul. "Why?" she whispered. "Why do you care so much? I'm nobody." Mama Adwoa smiled, a small, tender curve that lit up the night. "You're somebody to me," she said simply. "And that's enough. Come home, child. Let me take care of you." The word home hung in the air, fragile and precious. ABA's chest ached with it, a longing she buried beneath the weight of rejection. She nodded, too overwhelmed to speak, and let Mama Adwoa help her to her feet. Her legs wobbled, but the old woman's arm around her waist was steady, unyielding. The lantern swung as they walked, casting a soft circle of light that pushed back the darkness. The journey back to the bakery was slow, ABA's steps faltering with exhaustion, but Mama Adwoa never rushed her. She hummed a quiet tune, an old Ashanti lullaby ABA dimly remembered from childhood, its melody weaving through the rustle of leaves and the drip of rain. The sound wrapped around ABA like a blanket, easing the knots in her heart. For the first time in days, she felt a flicker of peace, faint but real. When they reached the bakery, the sight of it nearly broke her again. The door hung crooked, the counter still bore scars from Kojo's rampage, but the stove glowed with a fresh fire, and the air carried the faint promise of baking bread. Mama Adwoa guided ABA inside, settling her on the straw mat near the warmth. "Rest now," she said, draping a clean wrapper over ABA's shoulders. "You're safe." ABA sank into the mat, her body heavy but her spirit lighter than it had been in weeks. She watched Mama Adwoa bustle around, stirring a pot of egusi soup, slicing a plantain to fry, her movements slow but deliberate, a quiet dance of care. "Thank you," ABA whispered, her voice thick with gratitude. I don't deserve you. Mama Adwoa paused, turning to look at her. You don't have to deserve it, she said softly. You just have to let me give it. She brought over a bowl of soup, steam curling from its surface, and pressed it into ABA's hands. Eat, child. Let's start there. ABA took the bowl, her fingers trembling as she sipped the rich, spicy broth. It warmed her from the inside out, a small spark in the cold hollow of her being. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, and let her eyes drift shut. The sound of Mama Adwoa's humming filled the room, a steady rhythm that held the night at bay. As sleep crept over her, ABA rested a hand on her belly, feeling the child stir. We're home, she murmured, her voice barely audible. For now, we're home. Mama Adwoa watched from across the room, her eyes soft with a love she didn't need to name. Outside, the wind still howled, but inside, a fragile light burned steady, a promise of tomorrow. The wind howled through the cracks of the abandoned shack where ABA had curled up, a cruel lullaby that offered no rest. The night was a black void, pressing against her swollen eyes, her body trembling from cold and hunger. She lay on her side in the dirt, her torn wrapper barely covering her, her hands cradling her belly, as if it were the last piece of herself she could hold on to. The child inside kicked faintly, a whisper of life in the wreckage of her spirit. I'm sorry, she murmured, her voice a fragile thread lost in the gusts. I tried. I really tried. Her stomach growled, a hollow ache that had become a constant companion. She hadn't eaten since the scrap of bread 2 days ago, stolen from her bag along with her hope. The streets had rejected her, every plea for work met with cold stares, every corner a reminder of her worthlessness. Akojua's words, out by morning, or I call the police, echoed in her mind, a final shove into the abyss. She'd wandered away from the rest house at dawn, her feet dragging her to this forgotten place where the town's edge met the wild, untamed bush. Here, at least, no one could see her break. ABA's breath hitched, a sob she couldn't suppress. Her mind was a tangle of shadows, Kwame's fury, Efua's disdain, Kojo's fists, the market's jeers, Akojua's sneer. They swirled together, a storm that drowned out the girl she'd once been. I'm nothing, she whispered, her lips trembling against the dirt. I'm nothing to anyone. The thought of her child growing up in this darkness, of being hated as she was, clawed at her chest, leaving her gasping. She closed her eyes, willing the world to fade, to let her slip away into the quiet she craved. A soft crunch broke the silence, footsteps, slow and deliberate. ABA's heart stuttered, but she didn't move. She was too tired, too broken to care if it was Kojo or some other predator come to finish her. The steps grew closer, stopping just above her head. A faint light pierced the darkness, warm and golden, brushing against her face like a gentle hand. ABA! The voice came soft and trembling with worry, yet flowed steady like a gentle river. It wrapped around her, pulling her from the depths. She opened her eyes, blinking against the glow of a lantern. A silhouette knelt before her, Mama Adwoa, her face etched with exhaustion, her headscarf slipping back to reveal silver strands. She held the lantern in one hand, an old umbrella in the other, its edges frayed but shielding them from the drizzle that had begun to fall. ABA's breath caught, a sob lodging in her throat. Mama, she whispered, her voice raw and disbelieving. She reached out, her fingers brushing the hem of Mama Adwoa's wrapper, as if testing if she were real. Oh, my child, Mama Adwoa gasped, dropping to her knees in the dirt. The lantern clattered beside her, its light spilling across the ground, illuminating the tears glistening in her eyes. I've been looking everywhere for you, day and night, asking every soul in Kumasi, where's my girl? Where's my ABA? Her voice broke, and she pulled ABA into her arms, cradling her like a mother with a newborn. ABA melted into the embrace, her body shaking as the dam inside her burst. I didn't want to hurt you anymore, she sobbed, her words spilling out between gasps. They broke your shop, they hurt you, all because of me. I had to go. I had to. Hush, hush, Mama Adwoa murmured, rocking her gently. Her hands, rough from years of dough and fire, stroked ABA's back with a tenderness that felt like sunlight after a storm. You didn't hurt me. Those fools did, their hate, their small hearts. Not you, never you. She pulled back just enough to cup ABA's face, her thumbs wiping away the tears and grime. You scared me half to death, running off like that. I thought I'd lost you. ABA clung to her, burying her face in Mama Adwoa's shoulder. The scent of flour and palm oil clung to the old woman's wrapper, a lifeline pulling her back from the edge. "I'm sorry," she choked out. "I didn't know what else to do. Everyone hates me. They call me a thief, a disgrace. I couldn't stay and ruin you too." Mama Adwoa's grip tightened, her voice soft but fierce. "Listen to me, ABA. You're not a disgrace. You're my family now, you hear? I don't care what they say, what they do. I'd search this whole world for you, and I'd do it again." She smoothed ABA's tangled braids, her fingers gentle but sure. "You're not ruining me. You're giving me something to fight for." ABA lifted her head, her eyes searching Mama Adwoa's face. The lines there spoke of a hard life, but the warmth in her gaze was a balm, soothing the raw edges of ABA's soul. "Why?" she whispered. "Why do you care so much? I'm nobody." Mama Adwoa smiled, a small, tender curve that lit up the night. "You're somebody to me," she said simply. "And that's enough. Come home, child. Let me take care of you." The word home hung in the air, fragile and precious. ABA's chest ached with it, a longing she buried beneath the weight of rejection. She nodded, too overwhelmed to speak, and let Mama Adwoa help her to her feet. Her legs wobbled, but the old woman's arm around her waist was steady, unyielding. The lantern swung as they walked, casting a soft circle of light that pushed back the darkness. The journey back to the bakery was slow, ABA's steps faltering with exhaustion, but Mama Adwoa never rushed her. She hummed a quiet tune, an old Ashanti lullaby ABA dimly remembered from childhood, its melody weaving through the rustle of leaves and the drip of rain. The sound wrapped around ABA like a blanket, easing the knots in her heart. For the first time in days, she felt a flicker of peace, faint but real. When they reached the bakery, the sight of it nearly broke her again. The door hung crooked, the counter still bore scars from Kojo's rampage, but the stove glowed with a fresh fire, and the air carried the faint promise of baking bread. Mama Adwoa guided ABA inside, settling her on the straw mat near the warmth. "Rest now," she said, draping a clean wrapper over ABA's shoulders. "You're safe." ABA sank into the mat, her body heavy but her spirit lighter than it had been in weeks. She watched Mama Adwoa bustle around, stirring a pot of agusi soup, slicing a plantain to fry, her movements slow but deliberate, a quiet dance of care. "Thank you," ABA whispered, her voice thick with gratitude. "I don't deserve you." Mama Adwoa paused, turning to look at her. "You don't have to deserve it," she said softly. "You just have to let me give it." She brought over a bowl of soup, steam curling from its surface, and pressed it into ABA's hands. "Eat, child. Let's start there." ABA took the bowl, her fingers trembling as she sipped the rich, spicy broth. It warmed her from the inside out, a small spark in the cold hollow of her being. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, and let her eyes drift shut. The sound of Mama Adwoa's humming filled the room, a steady rhythm that held the night at bay. As sleep crept over her, ABA rested a hand on her belly, feeling the child stir. "We're home," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "For now, we're home." Mama Adwoa watched from across the room, her eyes soft with a love she didn't need to name. Outside, the wind still howled, but inside, a fragile light burned steady, a promise of tomorrow.